Alright, after playing around with the near immortal Mirage, I wanted to see if we could recreate the magic with other professions as well. Turns out, we can make a Spellbreaker heal through pretty much anything. This time around, I'll provide a framework for the most defensive setup and gradually change out skills, traits and gear to add more offense to the build. The major difference with our Mirage build is that we're not focused on avoiding damage, but rather out-healing any damage we might take. Any champion without a unique damage mechanic can be literally face tanked and whittled down with auto attacks only. And for those that do have a big hitter or a lingering AoE field, you might want to consider moving out of those, but feel free to take your sweet time doing so. True to the new format, everything you're seeing in this video is with celestial gear. Even though we're wasting some of the condition stats, it didn't matter all that much when I was farming regular enemies, so I'm fine with it. I'll of course give you a couple of alternative setups later on in the video. But first, let's take a look at our traits. Strength will increase the power we get from might as well as our critical hit chance. And it'll make our dodges deal damage as well as let our burst skills restore some of our endurance, so that we can dodge even more. As for the major traits, you'll want to pick up peak performance for a free 5% damage boost, as well as a damage boost every time we use a physical skill. Right now, you see me playing the lazy version of the build with signets only, but I'll provide a setup that takes full advantage of this trait in the pinned comment. Forceful Greatsword grants a chance to gain might on landing a critical hit, as well as some extra power. And Might Makes Right will heal us anytime we apply might to ourselves. Both other Grandmaster traits are worth considering if you want a more offensive setup, but I chose to go all in on sustain. Originally, I started out with a hammer and defense as the second trait line, before realizing almost every other Spellbreaker build is already using those. So we're going to be taking tactics instead. The minor traits will let us deal increased strike damage for every boon currently on us and heals us every time we grant might to any ally. You won't care as much about this last one when you're playing solo, but it's pretty nice during meta events. Tactics also grants you marching orders, which is a pretty unique trait. Every 10 seconds you'll gain Soldier's Focus, which will grant you and any nearby allies might whenever you land a burst skill. And we're going to be expanding on this with the Soldier's Comfort and the Martial Cadence major traits, which will now let Soldier's Focus also heal, grant protection and stability to yourself and anyone near you every time you land your burst skill. The middle trait, Empower Allies, will grant us and any nearby allies 5 might every 10 seconds as well. And remember that the Might Makes Right trait from the Strength trait line will heal us every time we gain might. So the whole Tactics trait line will provide us with steady healing every 10 seconds, as well as a burst heal every time we can land our F1 ability. Our elite spec is of course Spellbreaker, which will cap our adrenaline at 2 bars and only allows us to use our level 1 burst. But in return, it'll grant us full counter, which is basically an I don't care button that will allow us to take almost any hit to the face. For the major traits, we're going with Pure Strike for an 8% increase to our crit damage, as well as another 15% increase if our enemies have no boons. As mentioned, I didn't want to make yet another hammer build, so I went all in on daggers, for which Sun and Moon style is the ideal trait. Our main hand dagger will increase our damage by 10% to boonless foes, and our offhand dagger will convert 4% of our crit damage to healing. Our final major trait is Magebane Tether, which will link us to our enemies after landing our burst skill. This will let us deal 10% extra damage to them and grants us might as well as a few other benefits. As you can see, I'm running an incredibly lazy version of this build with all signets. I still periodically activate them for some bonus healing, stability or cleansing any conditions I might have on me. But overall, it allows for a pretty relaxed playstyle. If you want a more active version of the build, you can choose for either even more healing or more damage by simply swapping out your utility skills. If you swap out some of the signets for physical skills, you'll be able to benefit from Peak Performance's damage buff as well as adding more crowd control to the build. If you want even more healing, swap Martial Cadence to Vigorous Shouts and replace all of the signets with shout skills instead. Every shout will then heal you for 1000 HP and convert 13% of your power to healing power as well. If you're going this route and you still die, you should have moved out of that AoE. By the way, if you're doing meta events, you can swap out Martial Cadence to Phalanx Strength for some broken amounts of healing as well. As promised in one of my previous community posts, I'm now showcasing everything on Celestial gear in my build guides. I chose to add Infiltration runes to increase my power and critical strike chance, but to be honest, any rune will work just fine. If you want a more efficient stat setup, you should go either Berserker for full offense or Knights for some extra toughness. Usually, I'm inclined to recommend Marauder's gear for the open world, but I feel the extra toughness in combination with our ludicrous amounts of healing will work better. I am running daggers in most of the footage, with one equipped in my main hand of the first set and one in my offhand of the second set. This will still give you access to all 5 skills, but it'll let you weapon swap as well. I was doing this because I was running Sigil of Force for extra strike damage and Sigil of Battle, which grants 5 stacks of might whenever I'm swapping weapons. So every time I do weapon swap, I get more healing thanks to the Might Makes Right trait. I'll be the first to admit that I was doing this just for the fun of it and to go overboard on sustain. A more sane option would be to have a set with daggers in both your main and offhand, and a set with an axe in your offhand. Both Axe's 4 and 5 skills deal incredible amounts of damage and should increase your overall DPS. But this build is all about having fun, so do whatever you prefer. If you're not going for my double daggers gimmick, you should replace the Sigil of Battle with either Impact for more damage or Blood if you still want some extra healing. When it comes to the relics, we can actually make this build even more hilariously overpowered. I was running Relic of the Defender, which heals me for 5% of my maximum HP every time I block an attack. There are of course better offensive options, such as the Relic of the Thief, or you could even play around with some of the newer ones, such as the Relic of Mabon. By now, you should probably realize that about every single thing that you do with this build will heal you for some ridiculous amounts of HP. But why stop here? You can actually buy fried golden dumplings for only a couple of copper on the trading post, which will also grant you a chance to gain might whenever you land a critical hit. This will in turn activate the Might Makes Right trait and heal you once more. There's also food that applies might on dodge, but those are much more expensive. The playstyle of this build is really simple. Use your burst, which is your F1 skill, whenever you can, and try and land a full counter, which is your F2 skill, whenever an enemy is either attacking you or is about to land a big hit. Successful full counters also reset your burst, so in an ideal sequence you'll be landing your burst, full counter, followed by another burst. All of the dagger skills are worth using off cooldown. If you can, try not interrupting your auto attack chain, as the third strike will also grant you might. All of the other dagger skills will either remove boons, daze your enemies, or in the case of dagger 5, provide you with tons of extra healing and a barrier. Feel free to use the trait setup as a framework and experiment with other weapons though. I already mentioned using an axe in your offhand for a damage increase, but you can also try out a greatsword as well. If you do prefer running a hammer, I feel like the defense trait line is much better than our tactics trait line. I'll link Meta Battles guide for that particular build, as I don't want to simply copy an already established build or guide. If you want to see any other builds taken to the extreme, let me know which elite spec you want to see next. And make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons on your way out.